computer. Okay. All right. Make sure it's recording. I think it is. All right.
Yep.
I got a
Um,
message. Okay.
so I guess I'll start. I just got the discussion questions in front of me, and we can just start and talk through them. I actually, these two modules have been, I think they've been my favorite. Um, I think it's because it's not two things that I knew a whole lot about. So I think that's why I've enjoyed them. How does using the semantic relationship between words such as synonyms, antonyms, phonemes, and hypernyms enhance your ability to teach vocabulary to multilingual learners? No, monolingual and multilingual learners.
Yeah. Um, well, I definitely think that word mapping and just kind of connecting, words to each other is so powerful, and then learning almost right away different ways that you can say things like and being more descriptive, like bird. Well, what kind of bird? Oh, sparrow. We could start adding pretty much webbing or creating different word bubbles and different things to kind of connect and tie and almost, I mean, I know that I'm thinking monolingual very, but I'm also thinking other students I have that are, the few students I'm serving right now in EIP that are also multilingual, and um, getting them comfortable pretty much early on with another word that means the same thing, showing relationships. And we've done like the paint little shades of meaning with words using little the free things from the Home Depot with the colors of the different paint swatches. And we've just gotten, related to their writing, just, oh, another way to say, said, or, well, did they yell it? Did that, like going from whispered it to yelled it, and then different ways that they could have their characters talking in their writing, or, just without always saying said, or, just kind of sort of expanding vocabulary that way. How
Yeah,
about,
this was really fun. For
yeah.
I pulled my student, and then I pulled another student with him because I did the activity where the semantic gradulants, am I saying that right? Uh,
Gradient?
Gradient, yes. So I
Yeah.
did it with them. And so the first thing I did is I had them do a matching game where they matched the Spanish word to the English words. And it was all around slow, fast, and walk.
Mm.
So walk was the median. And so I had them match Spanish with English words first because they're both very low ESOL students. And it was weird because there were two words that in Spanish that they said, we don't know these words. And so I just pulled those words out and did not let them do it. And then I had them do it in Spanish and they struggled more. And it's weird. In Spanish, they actually seem to struggle more to put them in order. And then in English, it was weird because they were stood up and they're like showing each other like what it looked like if they're crawl like they were crawling, and then they were like if you dash, they were running around like we
I
had this room to
love that.
ourselves, and so they were running around and they were showing each other, and then they would go decide where to put it, and the English would seem much easier for them than the Spanish.
That's
That's
funny, but I wonder
amazing.
if it's because there's different, like the one section talked about dialects, or like different, like because the different Spanishes do use different words for things, so they must just not have known from wherever they're from.
Right.
Interesting. I think that as like native English speakers, we take a lot for granted because we just know. And when you look at these students and you give a word like, hey, run that to the whatever, they might literally think you mean run it there when we know it's figurative. So like you have to like no wonder kids can't understand when they're learning the language because there's so much inferencing and so
Oh
much
my
that they have to know beyond the definition. Like they have to read the context and know the conceptual meaning and the intended meaning, and synonyms, antonyms, like there's so much that goes into them understanding the word and how to use the word correctly.
For sure.
And I think I don't know if this falls in this category, but I think when it comes to synonyms, maybe,
Mhm.
I don't know. I have had so many discussions with my student about brother, sister, uncle, aunt, grandparent, these words. And it's still a constant battle. He'll say my sister, and I'll be like, wait, we determined that you only had one brother. What do you mean your sister? Well, it's just use the term so loosely.
Mm,
And sister, his what he calls sister, it's basically another girl that lives at their house.
got it.
That's a child in pre-K.
I
So
know. And how
it's
old is
not
your
his
student again?
fourth grade, 10,
Fourth grade, 10. Okay.
been in US schools since first grade.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but that kind of shows they don't truly understand the meaning of what a sister is. They can call it that, but that's not
Right.
truly the definition or the meaning or how we use it in a sentence.
Right.
I
And
used to have younger students when I taught kindergarten, first grade, even beginning of the year, where they couldn't they didn't understand the age concept of things. Like they thought that, I don't know what they thought of my age was, but when I would talk about like introduce myself and my family, they thought my son was my brother, like they just didn't understand that, like they weren't sure who these people were, like not thinking, oh, this teacher is the age of like my back then maybe mother, but now more like grandmother, but couldn't process. But do you think that comes into play at all, or no? Because he knows the age probably of the sister who is actually
yeah, I think
yeah.
it's just, and I think it's
Mhm.
pure, to me, I think it's a pure miscommunication with English. Because
Okay.
like the aunt and uncle thing, we were having a conversation about his Easter weekend, and
Yes.
he kept saying aunt and uncle interchangeably. And I said,
Mm.
is this a man or is this a woman? And he was like, oh, it's a man. And I'm like, aunt? And so it's like we
Mm.
were like, and this is not new for him. This is something
No,
that has been going on ever since
and
I picked him up in January, and I was like, wait a minute, this is it's like and it's almost like, I mean, even though I meet with him 3 days a week for 45 minutes, and anytime we have a conversation, which I have been doing lots of just talking with him,
Mhm.
especially because of module 6. So I've been doing a lot of talking with him, and it's like a whole, like it just keeps coming up.
Like in
And yeah,
Spanish, their words are much closer than English, like hija, tia, tio, that's aunt, uncle, right? Hermana, hermano, those are so close. But in English, our words, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, very different from each other, like that's just
right.
one little change in Spanish from what I remember. Um, I could be incorrect on that, but I definitely think that tia tio, like, because I actually have my sister-in-law is a native Spanish speaker, and my nephews know some Spanish from her, and like I'm pretty sure they call their aunt Titi, like her sister is Titi Tia, and so, but our words are not even that similar. It's not like we have, you know,
Yes, but
yeah,
he may be thinking
yes.
they are that similar.
Maybe that
You
they're
see what
almost
I'm saying?
interchangeable because he may not have
Right,
even keyed in on he may not hear Tia like when his relatives are saying Tia, Tia Tio is coming or whatever. Maybe he's not hearing the end and he's just thinking it means the same thing. And so
right.
he's picking one English one and going with it.
Yes, I can see now. I
Maybe.
can see that being the case.
And you might
Yeah,
just need to actually tie it to the Spanish for him and be like, okay, what do you call your uncle? And then if he says Tio, you say, okay,
right.
uncle is Tio, and like have the picture of a male,
Yes.
aunt is Tia, and have a picture of like a female.
I could try that.
Yeah.
Okay,
In
so
this section too, I liked the thing too that because it kind of goes into this, but the bow, bow, read,
Mm,
read, like all
mm.
those words that we just know which one it means, they don't know which
Yes,
one it means. So
right.
it's like he doesn't know which one aunt uncle means. He just
Yeah.
doesn't know.
Mm-mm. I thought that was great. I love seeing on, like, I really enjoy the Cox Campus videos. Like, I finished, of course, all those, but I got a lot out of seeing the integration between okay, who wants to tell us how you say that in Spanish? Like, I'm guessing because that's something that I'm likely you in your environment, maybe incorporation like that it happens. Ours, like our kids do not get that kind of exposure. We don't have our English learners are not, Spanish speakers, and also they're so different. There's that I will do that specifically with one child and ask, oh, do you want to tell us what the word is that is for but it's not as much of a like I love seeing those videos where there is a lot of connection and the kids are even supporting each other with reinforcing the Spanish, and I saw it on one of the videos. They said, no, it's not, and then she said, oh, well, you say it this way. And, the teacher did such a great job. And I just loved seeing that.
Yeah, it's definitely something I wish I did more when my class was 99% Spanish speaking, but I do know when I did, or like
Yeah.
it came up naturally, they did have different ways of saying things. Because, like, I
Yeah.
had some from El Salvador, some from Honduras, Mexico. And it would be a discussion, and it was actually pretty interesting to see them be like, oh, your Spanish is different than my Spanish. And then tying that into the English, that truly helped everybody
It
get
does.
a
It's such
deeper
a good way to
semantic
cognate.
understanding. Mhm.
That's cool. Like we've been talking more about where words come from too, like with exceptions and, generalizations, but then here's an exception and trying to figure out why, I put something in the chat I'm gonna share with you. You both are probably maybe familiar with this already, but it's the Cox 101 Tier 2 academic vocab words that have it in I love the most simple version of the English definition, and it has the Spanish there right with it. And I've been using this document because I love that it's such a simplistic way to get that academic vocabulary in without like too many words of defining it. I think that's hard sometimes on the fly to think of a good definition for a little kid to, grasp it.
right.
And I really like this. I came across this and then shared it when in one of my trainings I was just doing, and seemed like I actually printed it and laminated it to have it right in my like on with me to like sort of try to get as many of these words spoken and talked about.
That kind of leads into the next question. Discuss the
Ah.
role of core vocabulary in developing proficient reading comprehension.
Mhm.
How do you select and teach core vocabulary in your classroom to support students' systematic development and overall literacy skills? And that, what you just shared with us, that of course is really good. I know that we use a lot of pictures and we do a lot of choral reading. Um, and also comparing definitions. We
Mm.
do a lot of that also with our kids. I would love to say that we use picture dictionaries, but we really don't.
Mm.
We did, but it kind of has become a thing of the past.
I really do think that because it's somewhat time consuming. Oh, picture dictionaries like not creating student picture dictionaries where they drew the meaning.
Oh, where they look
But
it up.
yeah,
Yeah, we used to have those. We
oh
don't have them
gosh.
anymore.
I
There
have
was
a
something
great
that's I want to read. I'm trying to find something that we read. Oh no, what article was it in? It was in one of these articles. It talked about how um no, it was in the book. It it talked about how the oh, it says research has determined, it's in the book article on page 113. It
Mhm.
says research determined that simplifying registers or extensive repetition or paraphrasing were not actually necessary for language acquisition,
Mm.
as was previous believed.
Ooh.
That, I mean, I was like, my little highlighter was going crazy right there. And I tend to agree with this part, the paraphrasing not being necessary,
Uh-huh.
because what I have noticed is if a child does not understand and I attempt to paraphrase, it's a very good chance they still don't understand. And then I have to keep trying to get them to understand.
Mhm.
And it becomes a cycle of trying to get them to understand. Okay. And so that tells me that my paraphrasing is not working. So I would be like, okay, let me find a picture,
Right.
or let's something different besides just paraphrasing. Um, and we, and it's in, I mean, we're right in the middle of test season and we can't paraphrase the directions, right? But those kids are doing just fine. Like when I say, reading my little script, and I'm like, okay, you at the end you're gonna do whatever. I mean, they're doing just fine, and I did not paraphrase any of it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, it's kind of resonating with me that I'm agreeing with the article. I don't think I agree. I don't think that that is going to make a very big difference.
I also think like fewer words sometimes is better, like, and I know I struggle with this, and it was only really when I had a full-time interpreter always signing every single thing I said all day that I got like, I want the kids to talk more than me. I do need to be explicit, direct, and do all the instruction and, make sure they're getting everything they need. But I do think I have historically overstated the things that they may not, and then it just becomes another thing. Either some kids maybe start to check out, others are focused more on some other word I said that they don't know about, and then they're, gonna be thinking about it. It almost could be counterproductive. I could see it now with what you said and it being in the book as well. So, what
For
Yeah,
about you?
me,
Cindy.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
sorry.
Cindy.
It froze. For me, I believe like vocabulary instruction, I think it said should happen in context, not isolation. And it should not be a memorization thing. It should be flexible and allow student choice. And I already shared, so I am moving to fifth grade next year. I'm gonna go up.
Oh,
And I've already shared with one of the teachers the idea about the treasure chest, the vocabulary, and letting the kids pick out words. And I saw another thing that was really great on Edutopia where it was quotes from the books and you put it on the wall. So she's on board to do both of those and then we'll play bingo when we've got all the words. But right now we have a very scripted curriculum. So the way that I made that work in my classroom is I posted it on the wall and it's got the definitions and pictures and then each one of my kids has a folder with the vocabulary and like if we're unpacking the learning targets and they don't know the word for like what does examine mean or explain, they look through that vocabulary word wall and find it and look up the definition and then we look for synonyms, antonyms, like we have that conversation. And if it's not in there, then we add it and we look up all that stuff and talk about it. And we kind of do it that way. And then that vocabulary is split by academic language and content specific, but I don't believe in like splitting it so they don't know it's really different. But it's so cute when I'm like, what does this word mean? And they instantly pull those folders out and go searching for them.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and that'll
They
be
ever bring you a word like I've done that all year. I had these little mini journals, kind of blank journals, and my upper grade EIP kids have like this, word detective. So they're out listening for things they've never heard before, or like a new word comes their way in content or something that they didn't, maybe they're not sure if their teacher already talked about it and they should know it. So they'll bring all their words to me and then we kind of have sorted them out, but mostly their book has gotten full of what they're organically getting exposed to, or a friend is saying something in conversation. And a lot of the kids that I work with are very late to be able to read, so they have missed exposure to like just independently facing a lot of new vocabulary, or just haven't, for whatever reason, some different language processing, some different things that they just, are we're trying to, triple up on that, like just really grow their vocabularies, but tying it back to what we were saying before with other words. And it sounds like you have like ignited the excitement of being the words are treasure. I love that.
It is fun, but they also, like you said, when we read like a shorter passage or something, I will stop and just say, what words do we not know? Because I don't know what they don't know, and sometimes like I just think they got it all because they're just following along. So I like to try to be like, okay, any words, and sometimes, I mean, it's a safe place, so they'll share
Yes.
and we talk about it, and I'm like, good job, thank you for saying you didn't know what that means, and if I have any non-English speakers, we can like talk about it in their language or see if they can bring it up.
Yeah, your bingo, or what was it called? Money.
Mm-hmm.
Was that this class?
Was it like a
Um,
$1 million word or something, I
no,
think?
no, no.
Oh,
It
What was
was this class, the money bingo.
the money bingo? Did we read about it or did
Yes,
we a video?
it's in the
Okay.
book.
Yeah, so we read about it and it's sounds like a flex day activity to me.
Yes.
A really good flex day
You know
activity.
what's another fun thing to do is those little gel hands, and you play vocabulary and you let them slap the note card with the vocabulary word on it with those little gel hands.
Yeah.
I
You
love
grab
that.
the
Like the
word and it's their
sticky
word.
hand.
That's
Yep.
fun. I like
Grab a
that too.
word. Oh, I love that. One thing I have done with vocabulary that I've put different vocabulary that we've encountered and, want to review into ChatGPT, and created little games or different, even a reader's theater that incorporated those words. I would say decodable, include these words, this, these phonic skills, whatever. And it does poof, makes this. I'll even put the kids' names in for which part they're going to say and all that. And they just cannot believe that I'm also an author. So that made this custom, whatever, with help from computers, but they're excited about that. And seeing the vocabulary in different context than where we originally, maybe where it originally came from. So
I had a question and it totally flew out of my head when you were talking.
I'm sorry.
And I was okay, so this is my question. So I can't remember what we read. Give me grace. What about irregular words or sight words? Do you have um anything do you do anything with those?
Okay.
That
So we teach the regular parts. So we teach every word as, with the exception of maybe a few words like of, where both of the letters are heart parts. I'll put stuff in the chat for you on this, okay? Like easy little explanation of it so I don't get too wordy on it. But basically, we do not teach the sight words the way that we were traditionally teaching them in our program, at our school, and with like structured literacy, and Orton Gillingham being our like way to teach the phonics side of reading. So every word, like even want, we would show them, introduce the word and say, oh, this word is want. Let's tap out the sounds that we hear. And only one of part in want is a rule breaker, kind of an exception. And we draw a little heart. They have like a red little flare pen or something that whatever they have, their teacher, a red crayon, something, but they put a red heart on the tricky part. And then we orthographically map it by like practicing, playing games, things like that. But they don't have to memorize as many words anymore. We just try to memorize that that word has a tricky part, that hard
Oh,
part
okay.
that you have to learn
Yes.
by heart. Yeah. So, like in the word one, there's, other, you hear the but you don't hear the, and we also teach like that no English words end in V, and that's why there's an E, like in give. So they know a lot of rules. And so, and they
Right.
love pointing out those rules, but it's,
Well, I
yeah,
was discussing it with some teachers at
yeah.
school, and I guess I did not realize that the beginning level of reading, 75% of their words that they read are sight words.
They are, all words become sight words when you
Yes, yes,
learn
when you
them,
know the
right?
word, right?
But we like switched gears like 4 years ago to know like we want all words to become sight words, but we don't separate them as like do isn't even a sight word. Like D, that until once you learn the rule, some words will be a temporary sight word because you don't, I mean, have more hurt parts, because you don't know those rules like a vowel team yet or whatever, certain things. But words like even do is an open syllable, but the O is saying, a different sound. So it has a hard part. I did not know that.
Well, let me share what
Go ahead.
happened.
I'd love to hear. Yeah.
So, because we were talking about it, and so I took an MLL student and we actually started working on the old fry words
Yeah.
and through games. And so we played all kinds of games. And I did it every time I met with him. And his reading level went from first to third grade,
Yeah.
like in less than 2 months. And it was because he could say the hardest words.
Mm-hmm.
He could tap them out, he could sound them out. But when he came to the words that he couldn't do that with, he didn't know the words.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed, and so I just kind of used him as a guinea pig. And
Yeah.
it actually worked very well because
Uh,
to go from first grade to third grade, even though he's a fifth grader,
Yeah.
it's growth, right? And so I don't know, it made me kind of think I have a hard time throwing away some of the old things we used to do
Right.
and just doing structured literacy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
It's
you could integrate both by teaching those like heart parts, like she's talking about, but then still playing the game because what you gave him
right,
was exposure to the words over and over again until he got them.
All
right, of
my
course.
all my old sight word things are now a game after it's been like, and that the kids will even take my old bingo boards and find the heart parts and put them on, like a little like bingo from I don't know, Lakeshore that just has like level one sight words, level two, like a little more challenging. And they're the adult words, like we still have those lists. We still check kids to see how their automaticity is on those words. So there is value. It's just that our introduction of them is just done with the phonics lens of all the letters that sound that do work because they're
Right.
not all just the whole word isn't just a jailbird word or a trick word or it's a part of the word. It's just been something that we had to change in K to 2, like required of us to change that approach. And so it's now the kids are, like word detectives with that as well, like where they could find all the trick words or the heart words. We just say heart words now on the, list. And we practice those by like, mapping them like at first with like chips in L Conan boxes, and then we'll literally point, like we put the letters in and put the heart part in, and then they're like, after a bit, they're responsible for that word, it's not, but we have to practice it with games and things too. Like you said, that's
Hmm.
gamifying is like the way
I
to get
just
the repetition. Like they need like where and were are going to drive them in cuckoo, right? Like with and it's still okay to have mnemonic devices or little things like, and I used to swear by these things called snap words, which are still good for a lot of our special ed kids, like where the word looks like a picture to just get that word that it's not sticking for them. into their heads. It's like for right-brained learners, it says like these little snap cards. I mean, our school spent so much money on them because they were working so well for everybody, but it now goes against like we don't want to have, we were missing identifying a lot of kids because they could memorize so well, but the bottom fell out. Like they could walk around with a battery of sight words in their brains and like get by on sight reading, but they had, and this is just experience with EIP kids.
Well, I
Um,
know that since we picked up structured literacy, K through
yeah.
2, they do what's called snap and trap words.
Hmm.
And
How does that work?
a
Yeah.
trap word can become a snap word,
Oh, yeah.
but if they've not been taught the rule,
Yes.
then it's still a trap word.
So
But we
that's like
expect it's the same thing. We expect
yeah,
after the
same.
rule that it should become a snap word for you, for that child.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's cool. And I think the biggest thing is consistency within your like, especially K2, and even now our third is does phonics and all structured literacy. They've all been trained in Orton Gillingham. So we are like that's an expectation like that.
Yeah,
Um,
let's get to pragmatics because
there you
I
go. Yeah.
really enjoyed
I love that.
pragmatics. So how does pragmatic competence influence effective communication in the classroom?
I like that the text said it can be like invisible and focuses on the intended meaning within the context. It's very complicated for new language learners to actually understand while they're still acquiring the language. Because like I said earlier, kind of it's more figurative and requires like the inferencing to comprehend, which can be very challenging when you're just trying to understand. And so like I like to kind of think of it as you got to say what you mean and mean what you say, not use that. Like we've been doing idioms a lot in fourth grade right now, and it's very hard. They're like, "What? What do you mean don't look a gift horse in the mouth?" Like none of the kids get it, let alone the ESOL kids. They're like,
Gosh,
"What?"
there are things my 20-something-year-old sons are like, Mom, that sounds so old-fashioned. Let me think what that must mean, or whatever, like some very old phrases or
Yes.
something. Do you use any Amelia Bedelia with that?
I do. I love that.
Yeah,
But you know
I
what
love
they are
that.
doing is they're doing it without knowing they're doing it because the
Yeah.
brain rot that they love to say are like idioms. They just don't
Oh,
realize they're idioms. If you're like, I've got Riz, that's an idiom. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, it's true.
So I've kind of pointed that out and they're like, oh.
Well, then they
Um,
understand it because they're
in
Yeah,
doing
like
the
it.
one example is like they're taking the milestones. I'm like, you cooked the milestones. They know what that means because they know that's like a good thing. But if you're an ESOL student who's learning the language, they're like, what are you talking about?
yeah,
And so they have to understand the pragmatics of that sentence to truly get what it means.
there's so much to think about, right? Like, and even like, oh wow, you're on fire, or even some, same with you cook the milestones and all that. Like that could be its own word web of other ways, like phrases and things, and those idioms that are like, oh my goodness, like never mind, like killed two birds with one stone or some kind of crazy thing, like older thing that even English speakers do not hear, English monolingual students that with English as their main language may not even, you're like, what? You
Yeah,
know,
and then in this chapter too, they talked about the dialects and accents. And I moved around as a kid. And I remember when we moved to Florida and they were like, go get a buggy. And I'm like, oh, what? What's a buggy? I don't know what you're talking about. Where I come from, that's a cart. Like, go get a cart. So if you think about it that way, there is a lot we take like for granted that we just know the meaning of, and then when you go somewhere else, you're like, huh? Because sprinkles are jimmies in like Canada.
right? Right.
And then I guess the bubbler is a water fountain. I like that better, but I've never like if you told me to go to the bubbler, I'd have been like, no thanks.
And
Um,
a Michigan is a hot dog.
okay.
So if
And
you're in the
then
northern
how,
part of the U.S., if you ask for Michigan, it's hot dog.
What?
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
Holy
It's
cow.
crazy.
yeah.
Um,
So we're all
I think
native English speakers and we don't know what each other. We could probably
exactly,
have a
we
Right.
whole
would still have to use
conversation.
context and like ask for clarification, right? Even like getting into an elevator when I first moved to Georgia and someone was like, "Can you mash the two for me?" And I was like, "Oh, that must mean press," but I didn't, mash. I hadn't ever heard of it that way, or even we've been talking about schwa, how we schwa syllables and especially at the end and like just saying emphasis, on like, is it, I say umbrella, like from when I was a kid, but most of our students say umbrella, a little more of that, accent on that first syllable, but that's got to be even something that a nuance and things that will be kids trying to pronounce and hearing it from you, but maybe their peers differently or whatever, saying things like.
And I think it's important to let them learn that through conversation with each other because we model so much academic language that, and even my student that's from Vietnam, she won't talk to me. And I try not to take offense to it, but I know she's speaking to the kids a little bit, but it's because of her culture. You don't, like you just do whatever the teacher says and you respect them. But when I try to talk to her, she's like, and walks, like she's
Oh,
very
yeah.
quiet.
And you
But
respect that from
I
her.
know that other
Yeah.
kids too were like, "Oh yeah, we're teaching her English." And I'm like, "Okay." So
Is
they
she still
really,
like looking things up? I remember I was
yeah,
so impressed. Like she's logging doing Google Translate herself still
yes,
and
she's still
taking
translating.
pictures.
And I guess my partner teacher who teaches her math and science and social studies was like, I tried to give her something in Vietnamese the other day and she told me no, English.
That's
So she's just learning, and I mean, she took the milestones the last 3 days. I don't know what she did, but she was working. So I kept trying to get her to put her headphones on because she has read aloud, and she wouldn't put
oh,
them on.
oh
So
my
she,
gosh, that
Wow.
motivation
yeah,
is
she's
awesome.
definitely motivated, but I know she's learning a lot from talking to the kids, and I know like we'll get to it. I'm sure in the next question, Rebecca, but
Mhm.
I think we've talked about instructional
Go ahead.
conversation. Like I'm a firm believer in letting the kids talk and learn from each other.
More kid talk.
And I think that's why, I mean, I only, with this particular module, um, Pedro and I have done so many just, we're talking. Like we're just, he comes and I just say, how was your weekend? And I try to, strive for 5, try for 7. I try to keep that conversation going. And it's weird because actually, for one of our things we had to turn in, I did um, I went transcribed one of our conversations, and it was there was a very specific part where conceptual meaning got lost, and when he was talking about Easter and whatever I still don't understand what he was talking to me about, but I think it was something to do with a firecracker and you twist it and you throw it. And I was like, I have no idea. And I was trying to, and it was, it was like literally in our conversation, we had conversation breakdown and then recovery. It was that particular conversation, which you don't think about what you really say, and you don't think about what really they say until you start typing it from a recording and just watch just the things he was saying to me, and I was trying to make sense of what he was saying, and it was just it was just wild. It was just wild. But I did learn. So I did learn that this Easter is not really his Easter. Their Easter is they do Easter egg stuff on New Year's. I'd never heard that before.
Mm.
And so I was like, what? And so he was trying to explain it to me. But it's just been very interesting um just trying to just talk to each other. And I don't realize how many times I say idioms.
Hmm.
And is it a Southern thing?
I don't know. I'm also
Because it
very
seems like we
sarcastic
say them
because
all the time.
yeah, I think it is more of a Southern thing.
Hmm.
I'm also very sarcastic and I have to realize that I need to not be, you know?
I understand because I know I have had some sarcasm with him, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Huh?" He makes that like, "Huh? What are you talking about?" I'm
Mm,
like,
The
"I'm just
student,
kidding. I'm just kidding."
the student I'm working with, he just started to like his classroom teacher has mentioned this, like that he's starting to become funny. Like he's trying to like play with words or get his friends to laugh and say like, the chicken ate the whatever, the worm or something. I don't know, just some silly things. We've done something with it was one of my activities with him was to take parts of sentences, and put them together. First, he did cards all mixed up, and then he thought of different um, ideas that, characters that we could make a sentence about and act, what could it be doing and all this. And then he liked it at first, keeping it real. And then he had so much fun making them, that the bird ate cookies, on the moon. That was the way these cards went. And then he illustrated two real ones and two, fiction ones, and he enjoyed that. But now he's been taking something and doing a little tweak to it to make it funny. And his teacher said that that's been like very like tickled her a lot. Just seeing how he's always so serious. And this is just happening with his buddies in class is that now he's becoming funny, which he's
Hmm.
always funny, but he's feeling like he could figure out ways to make his friends laugh, and it's so exciting.
And I think another way to kind of teach the pragmatics or kind of get an idea is try to get them right similes and metaphors
Mm.
because they have a very hard time comparing two totally different things. At least I've noticed with my ESOL students, they're like, "What? Why? Why would I try to say the tree is, I don't know, like I can't think of any. It's been a long 3 days, but you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah, yeah. As fast as whatever, or
lightning or yeah.
yeah, the like finding exactly that is true. And I remember doing that even just with EIP first graders and same activities like that. I underlined something in my notes that came from the book, and it was the textbook, and it was that students might know the right vocabulary and grammar, but without pragmatics, they may come across as unclear or even perhaps rude, and that's definitely something that I notice with some of the even families that we speak with and come to, we have our RTI meetings and my EIP/EL students, um, just worrying if their child is always, being mannerly and, listening, following the rules, wanting that like, compliant behavior and all. And then definitely sensitivity about like, are they, um, like I couldn't imagine the kids being not respectful, but maybe in their experience of learning things that they've learned, English and had experiences like that, and maybe concerned that their child, we all face that, seeing,
Well,
communication. Yeah.
you're making me think about this article, and there's
Yeah.
one part, it says culturally appropriate choices when interacting with different subgroups will potentially lead to more positive experience, increased motivation, and appealing outcomes for learners. And so what I had my student do is we did an activity about appropriate things to ways to say things at school. So one of the things was like while you're playing a game, is it appropriate to say, "Ha ha, I beat you," or "This was fun, let's play again"?
Mhm.
And so he actually did this activity today, and it was all online, and I just did a PowerPoint, and he got to move stuff, but it was interesting to it was weird. It was interesting watching him because sometimes he does say things that sound inappropriate. Now, I question, I tried to, I question why. Is he saying it inappropriate because of behavior, or is he saying it inappropriate because he doesn't know how to say it any other way?
Mm.
And I think with this particular child, it's a little bit of both. I think sometimes he knows, but I think sometimes he doesn't know because in general he's a very good kid. And I think it's kind of a borderline being a fourth grader that he doesn't really sometimes I think he knows I shouldn't say. And it was weird because some of the ones I had put in there in his little activity were some things that he has said.
Oh.
And he looked at me like he was so funny. He looked at me and went, and I'm like, yeah, I've heard you say that before. And so I thought it was a good activity, and I think that I want to continue to like give him choices, like if give him some scenarios and be like,
Role
okay, would
play.
it be better to say this or would it be? And I talked to him a little bit about school environment and what is acceptable in the school environment, and then home environment
Mm.
and what might be acceptable in the home environment and how it could be different. And these are things, see, to me, I feel like this is explicit teaching and he doesn't know. I
Right.
think he
But
honestly doesn't know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
that just kind of ties into the last question of how you can teach pragmatics because it could be a lesson. And if you're in the classroom, it could be like with your small group, talk about this. What is appropriate to say, you know?
Yeah, definitely
And
like role plays are a huge opportunity to like literally put yourself, in the situation and come up with an opportunity to practice saying it, even, I mean, we have students that need to practice saying good morning, not because they are being intentionally ignoring adults saying good morning to them. It's just not comfortable. All the reasons, right? So that is even something, where we'll have people go on our little morning news broadcast. The adult will say, a goal for this week is to do something that they've observed not happening around the building, right? And then they're practicing and doing it almost overboard, but it is because hopefully it generates that in real time eventually that they're, in their
well, and I was thinking about your social norms. Um, like we have a little girl, we call her Tiffany. Bye. She's in our one of our newcomers. Yeah, she's pretty new. And she, she's very, I mean, I think she's Chinese. I'm not really sure, but I think she is Chinese. And she looks around the class sometimes and she is like, what is going on? Because social norms are I mean, I think they're way looser than she's used to. And so she'll just look at the kids and she's like, why are they acting that way? She doesn't, you know, understand that most of the time the way they're acting is acceptable.
Mhm.
You know, it's just not what she's used to. So,
Right.
imagine, yeah, definitely. That's especially if they came after having experienced school somewhere else or, even, from outside of the US, that would be likely. I mean, I have a neighbor who came here to work on her PhD, and we love talking about school when she was a kid versus, and she
mhm.
asks me so many questions about, things right now, like, well, how do you teach this? Or what do you do for, just so many things. But it's everywhere you go. It's the same. We experience it too, where it's almost like, ooh, where am I right now? This is different. If I came to your school, you came to mine. So for kids to see like, oh, they are, or, that's not how, I've seen people joke around with adults before, and even different adults allow like a little bit more that, or have a different approach and more maybe a strict environment or something and more another one more open or whatever. So them realizing which hat you're wearing. And I love when you're talking about like at home, this would be okay to say and here, no, make less appropriate.
Well, and also with pragmatics, I've been so into the conversation and catching myself and not and giving them enough wait time because if you don't get an immediate answer, then you're as a teacher, you're like, okay, let me simplify, try to say this a different way. And I think sometimes we overdo that and they just need a minute to process. So I work with a lot of multilingual teachers also. And some multilingual teachers are farther along in their English than others. And it's the same thing, like when I'm talking, and I do it with them. I don't do it as good with the kids, but with the adults, like
Mhm.
you can like you talk to them and and so you're, it's certain, like, okay, so one of the ladies I work with, she came to the US as an adult, and so she still has a really strong accent, and her processing time is longer. So when I talk to her, I give her time to think about what I said before I expect her to respond. Well, her daughter also works at our school. Her daughter's a fifth grade teacher, but she grew up in the US. And so it's the same family, right? But Casada, I can just be like talking, like I can just talk perfect, I don't have to give her any wait time. So I think it's just a matter of I do need to practice it more with the kids because I will start trying to explain, you know, thinking they don't understand when maybe they just need a second.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, like to reflect like that and to have, think about how we're differentiating for adults in our peers. And I was thinking earlier too about I have many students I work with that are on the spectrum, autism spectrum, and a lot of times we're rephrasing and retrying and doing, learning social things that are so there are a lot of pragmatics going on with, also, and
Yeah.
everyone benefits from, positive examples and reinforcement and discussing, why that might be, a way that to say there may be a more positive way to say it that would make our friends feel better, So kind of the similar connection, I think, to, um,
Is there anything else I
we
guess
can
I'll look
go
at the
from there.
last question and y'all can go ahead and y'all have it in front of you.
I do.
Yeah, it says, how can you incorporate activities that help students understand and use pragmatic elements of language appropriately in different social contexts? Provide examples of how you can teach pragmatics to your students, focusing on social norms, cultural conventions, and context-specific language use. Like I said earlier, day one in my classroom, I give accountable talk stems and we're having conversations, like you're not quiet in my classroom. You have to turn and talk when I say turn and talk. So we turn and talk about what's your favorite snack, which is better, McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. Like
Uh-huh.
we have to talk.
Oh my gosh, you just opened a light bulb for me because I swear I have been all year long, I go into classrooms and I observe and I'm sitting there thinking, why are you not doing a turn and talk?
Because you have to teach them.
We
Like I
don't
swear,
teach them. Oh my gosh, you are so smart.
I swear after COVID, when I got kids back in the room, they're just looking at me when I'm like turn and talk, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what we do. We turn our bodies and we
Yeah.
actually communicate. So since then, I've been teaching every group how I expect them to talk. And then I was trained in instructional conversations, which I love because they set group norms and then they have like they rate themselves on how they did in the conversation, if they talk, if they don't talk. But I've had very mixed groups where very quiet level one ESOL special ed students, and you learn real quickly you've got to wait and you just let them have the whole conversation. And it's really cute to see because an example of one is I gave pictures of like this mountain, a beautiful lake, and in the lake are these colorful rocks. And it's a science phenomenon. And you just say, how do you think those rocks got there? And if you wait long enough, somebody's going to pick up something, and then the others pick them up, and then the others. And so they have this whole conversation, and then you just go, okay, well, how do you think you did in this conversation? And they're very honest. They're like, yeah, I didn't talk as much as I should have.
Love that.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So I think that's for me. And then you can do them like with you, small group, or everybody's doing one, and you're kind of rotating and listening. So I think you could do that where you do, like Rebecca was mentioning, practicing, like, okay, in the playground, how would you say this? At home, how would you say this? And let the groups be mixed cultures, and so that they can hear, oh, you speak differently at home than I do.
So
That
now I'm just curious, what other strategy, I know you teach them how to turn and talk. What other things do you do at the beginning of the year?
Mm,
so
I One thing I like that they like also is I give them silent activities. So, like, I'll give them the rubber band with strings tied to it and a stack of cups and tell them to make me a pyramid, and they can't talk to each other.
Team building.
Mm-hmm. But it's team
That's
building
good.
without talking because so many of them want to say everything. And,
Right.
and I teach them to be scribes or scholars. So when you're a scribe, you can't talk. You have to just be quiet and write what people need you to write.
Working on those listening skills.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
we
And
have
kind
Or
of,
also working on, there are times to be, there are times you can't talk, like when the teacher's teaching.
yeah.
If
And
you
well,
talk,
we work on active
like teaching a
listening.
mini lesson
Yeah.
or something.
yeah.
And sometimes we have to report on what the partner says. So that turns you into a
Mhm.
good listener. So I don't want to know what your idea, like I'll tell them and we'll practice listening so carefully that our partner can tell that we know their message is important to us and a lot of that, but active listening and learning what an active listener does and having different little symbols like we learned from ASL, like me too, and I want to build on what you just said, like to let me know as soon as it's popping into their head that they're with us, they want to contribute, but they're also going to be respectful of their peer. Like while they're finishing what they're talking, that's super hard to learn that, to curb that impulsivity. But it, yeah, just having almost like sometimes we all say whatever we're thinking, like choral answering and all that. But other times, like in number talks, we want to hear other people's ideas for how they got their answer. And maybe it's the same way, or you're along the lines of what you're thinking, or you want to add to something they said or whatever. So we do teach a lot of those, but there's also a lot of talk too, where they're restating other, a strategy they learned today that they were, that they may try next time or different things, whatever the topics are. But having nonverbal communication where in real time they can tell you that they're thinking or they don't or they have their answer ready, but they have to hold it. They can't tell us what it is yet because other people still need more think time. But having like posted, and that's something that I do, is teach those symbols, and signals, more like signals. Yeah.
I
And
do
once,
love you said having them tell the partners
yeah,
answer. I do love that too, because when you're like, okay, well, you just turned and talked, now tell me what your partner said. They're like, wait, what?
know, because they're so egocentric,
Yeah.
Mimi
But
driven.
then sometimes some of them like it because they don't want to tell you what they said. They didn't have an answer. But if they can take their partner's answer, they're like, okay.
Right.
Love that.
Now, I'm curious, your instructional conversations, mandated at your school, not mandated?
No. So I was voluntold to do them at my last school. So I got trained and then I was a person chosen for our cluster to like go to the cluster meetings and all that. So then they did get mandated, but I left that year.
Yeah, we're mandated. We at least once a month, but now it's starting to shrink. When we started, it was all about interpersonal relationships when we did them. So communicating with each other, and then we moved into math.
Hmm.
So now it has been math centered, but depending on the grade level and how with it they are, now that it's trickling into everything.
Well,
And
I mean,
so it
EL
has
already
been,
kind of does them, so it's not
yes.
hard to do them for EL. And then science, they're great for the anchor phenomenons. They're better than just like, look at this picture. What do you notice and wonder? It is so much better to just let them talk about it because they've moaned and complained when I've stopped the instructional conversations over the anchor phenomenons. They're like, no, we're talking. Like they've loved them. So,
Yeah, it's been super successful.
Do
mhm.
you
It
have
blows my mind.
do you have morning meetings like a requirement for, yeah, we do too. Also with like an SEL. Yeah.
I mean, we do. Cindy, do y'all have required morning meetings?
Not really, but that's also a good place to
It's
kind of
best
teach
practice,
those.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and we do them like one day a week. We're required to have a meeting, but that's a good place to teach like the pragmatics and kind of talk about the different ways people speak and let them do those kind of activities.
Yes, and in almost some, it lends itself to some conversations or practicing things like saying what your partner said when it could be less academic during that time, and it could, be something about what they did over break or what their favorite foods are, or whatever that they think it's super fun to like, the meetings and it's then we just transfer those skills over in other meetings we have that are really a mini lesson. So,
All right. Well, I think I'm gonna stop
okay.
recording.